and illegal aliens.
Yeah, look.
Yeah, that's what we're worried about today. It's the border, ladies and gentlemen, the border issue and the illegal.
Yeah, look.
Yeah, illegal.
Free health care for illegal. Yeah, look.
Yeah, that's the big fear.
Illegal. Yeah, look.
They're all coming. So a couple things to straighten out right away. Hi, love you guys. Thank you guys for the support. Thank you for liking, subscribing on YouTube, since Twitch is being a dick for however long that lasts. We don't know. Anybody's fucking guess. Who can say? They don't even have to tell me. Lots to cover tonight. Yesterday, I managed to do... Oh, look at that. New Trier people in here. Welcome. Glad you could be here. I was just singing the praises of my school on Brian Karam's podcast, which I did today, which will come out on Tuesday. It was a great conversation. We learned all about each other. We have... Our moms know the same people. Like... Pretty great. All right, so Kentucky boys. Apparently, we're thinking about doing something called the Kentucky Chronicles, because unless there was another person sitting there telling you the story that we would tell, verifying the details, you'd go, "That's bullshit." That sounds like something out of a Beverly Hillbillies episode if they never struck oil, and you're like, "Yeah, kind of." So it was great. It'll be out. I'll tell you guys Tuesday when it happens. I'll tweet about it. So. Lots to talk about today, but one of the big parts of it, and I want to deal with this right away. So let's go. The border. Title 42 is the problem. Now wait for it. I've covered this a little bit in the past, but I want to be clear about how this shakes out. I want you to recognize that the institution of Title 42 during the pandemic was a stopgap measure by Trump because he couldn't get legislation passed or didn't even want to bother, and the idea of just kicking people out and making them stay in Mexico appealed to him, so he just went with it. But it ultimately raised the number of border crossings by a factor of at least 3, if not 5, because of recidivism. Instead of somebody crossing the border, their case being heard, and them either being accepted or rejected, everybody was just immediately rejected. So they said, back to Mexico you go. Off you go. And then they would try again. And they would catch them, and they would release them, and they would try again. And they would catch them, and they would send them back to Mexico, and they would try again. And the same person, every person that was arrested, the vast majority of over 60% of the people busted at the border have tried at least 3 times, which means Republicans will count that person as 4 human beings. One person crossing 4 times. Okay? So the number of crossings is the extraordinary number that you keep hearing everywhere. It is not the number of individuals crossing the border. And there have been a series of studies about this. Here is, let's see. This is probably the most obvious one, if I may, ladies and gentlemen. This is from the Cato Institute. Border looks identical to 2019 without repeat crossers. The number of people trying multiple times because Title 42 immediately kicked them out and said, don't even bother. It didn't process them. Didn't even care to. So they didn't, those people that were kicked out under Title 42 did not violate the final rule about crossing that you get under, say, Title 8, which means if you try illegally, you can't even get a visa for another 5 years. If you ever try to go legally, it will be a mark on your record. You've been processed through this. You've had a hearing and you were denied. We're not even doing that part. We're just kicking you the fuck out. And because they don't have that extra legal step attached to them, there's no harm, no foul for them trying again. They can just try over and over and over until they either get in or they get heard and they're allowed in legally, because none of their previous crossings are going to affect their future crossings, attempts, or be a mark on their record, because Title 42 eliminated the trial aspect of it. So they are effectively innocent because they weren't found guilty of trying to get into the country illegally, because their asylum claim, if they have one, was never processed. So these people could go again and again and again and again and never see the ramifications if they try to cross, say, under Title 8 and are rejected fully. fingerprinted, retinal scanned, and then if they ever try to sneak back in under another name or whatever, they go, nope, you crossed illegally. You had other options and you didn't use them. You decided to sneak into the country, and we reject you. That's what happens under Title 8. Under Title 42, they don't even bother. They don't go through the process. No one is there. We'll hear your case later. We'll take down your whatever name you give us. You go back to Mexico and wait, and we'll call you if we're ever going to do this, which Trump never intended to do. And the Biden administration, is trying to process the people with legit asylum claims who work with NGOs and other stuff. But there's a horde of people at the border that were backed up, and we're trying again and again and again. Okay, so the border crossings. The number of arrests at the border in February reached the highest level in any February in 15 years, and the government is projecting the highest number of arrests in 20 years. The reason that arrests have reached such a high level is that since March, the vast majority of crossers are immediately expelled to Mexico under authority in Title 42 of the U.S. Code. Once sent back to Mexico, the expelled can promptly recross. This is the Cato Institute. I've been telling you guys this for a long time. Here's another area. What is Title 42 and what does it mean for immigration at the border? This is from January 13th, and this is when they're talking about it breaking down. Let's see. Trump administration used Title 42 to essentially override immigration law that allowed people to ask for asylum after entering illegally and said we could send them back across the border, arguing that taking migrants into custody in federal facilities would create more of a public health risk. That's why Title 42 was used. The issue with it is that since 2020, there have been more than 2 million expulsions of migrants by U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. But this is due in part to recidivism. People trying to cross the border illegally, getting caught and sent back before trying again. Cardinal Brown says recidivism rates are higher than we've seen in many, many decades, and we do believe that Title 42 was one of the reasons why we saw people trying multiple times, which increased the numbers. Title 42's end won't affect most border crossers because one individual crossing once and having their case either heard and rejected or heard and accepted if they have an asylum claim does not affect the 5 mystery humans that Republicans think exist who are flooding the country, apparently filling jobs that Americans can't fill because they don't exist. It's super weird. Let's see. Figure 1 shows the number of border arrests by processing type. Title 8 and Title 42. Title 8 is the dark color. Title 42 is the orange. As it shows, the Title 42 era has seen a major increase in the number of total arrests. However, since April 2022, most illegal border crossers have not been subject to Title 42 expulsions. In October 2022, the most recent month available, only 30% of the crossers were processed under Title 42 rather than Title 8, meaning they've been rejecting a bunch of people. The number of arrests under Title 8 exceeded the peak of arrests under Title 8 during the Trump administration. So the Biden administration has been rejecting, military-age adult males who come in who clearly do not have an asylum claim at all, and have been focusing more on families with children, women with children, and the like. Hence the Republicans flipping the fuck out about Greyhound buses and airplanes full of toddlers and preteens showing up at Catholic charities in upstate New York, whatever. In October 22, 92% of expulsions were being used against single adults traveling without children, and 91% over those expulsions are of single adults from Mexico and the Northern Triangle of Central America. Mexico, Honduras, El Salvador. These are the closest ones because everybody else, the occasional Venezuelan or Guatemalan makes their way up here, but the vast majority of the time they just moved over to, because these countries are better than their country, so they jump over there. Not El Salvador maybe, but Mexico in particular. Families, adults with children, from those 4 countries account for another 6% of Title 42 expulsions, and all other families account for 2% of Title 42 expulsions. The other 98% are of the adults, single adults, right there from the Northern Triangle of Mexico. That's it. These families, that's the number of people who are being accepted under both Title 8 and 62. That's the number of actual crossings of people who come in and get to stay. These folks are just getting rejected out of hand. They're expelled under Title 42 now and will be expelled under Title 8. You know what the difference is? You know what the difference between this group of people and under Title 42 and under Title 8 is that under Title 42, they can try to cross as many times as they want. And if they're successful at one point, they don't, even if they get busted later for being an illegal immigrant in the United States and they get tried or what have you, then they're not going to have 9 crossings on their record as part of this. Part of the, you know how the Trump crowd and the maggots love to talk shit about illegal immigrants that commit a crime. Somebody murdered, and this person was kicked out of the country 5 times. This person was expelled 3 times before, and they managed to come back into the country. Right? You've heard this. Okay. That's because of Title 42. The first couple of times they were kicked out, they were just summarily kicked out. There was no trying. There was no, hey, we recognize this guy. He's a hitman for the cartels. No, there was no processing at all. Just like, nah, why are you here? I need a job. Fuck off. And they just drop him in Mexico and he just runs back over again or tries to pay somebody or is paid by somebody to come into the United States. Got it? Okay. So this number, these folks right here, under Title 42, they can try again and again and again and again and again and again and again, and it doesn't affect their record if they ever try to legitimately come in the country. Under Title 8, if they try again, they're rejected, and they can be arrested, put in jail. Yeah. How likely is a crosser to be expelled? This is February 2020. The Trump administration tried to do this with everybody. There's other single adults, families. This is the gray line. Look how high up the gray line went. Now, by December of 2020, the chance of being expelled if you're a family dropped precipitously. This is after Trump lost the election. He didn't give a fuck anymore. And the Biden administration is about processing folks like this. It goes up and down a little bit, but it's pretty much in the 6 to 8% category. They're 2% right now. But doesn't matter who the fuck you are, if you're a single adult from Mexico, Honduras, or El Salvador, 94% of the people who come in who are single adults get ejected. 97%, and here's the Trump administration up till February 21 when the Biden administration comes in, they stopped expelling these families so that they could process them. And then some of them didn't qualify, and then they started getting processed. And this is 64%. In here we're at 73. We're at what right now? 65% of families from Mexico get rejected because you have a country. It's right there. It's not a war zone. Blah blah blah. But this one right here, families from the Northern Triangle in Mexico, is the other single adults. Okay, other single adults usually means women. When they say other, that's what we're talking about here. When they talk about this one, the single adults, they mean men largely, just by volume. The other will be women, and then there's this others period is going to be like largely minors because they don't say adults or whatever. Okay, now does Title 42 deter single adults from the Northern Triangle and Mexico? So this is at some point, Title 42, let's see, this is the share of expelled people, and these are the total arrests. Single adults from the Northern Triangle of Mexico share expelled from 2018 to October 2022. This is under Title 42. Title 42 does not deter single adults from Mexico and the Northern Triangle from crossing the border. Further evidence is that Title 42 has led to a significant increase in recidivism. That is, the share of immigrants who were previously arrested the same year. The recidivism rate surged from about 20% in 2019 to 49% in 2022, meaning nearly half of single adults arrested under Title 42 from Mexico and the Northern Triangle were previously arrested under this policy. And it doesn't say how many times, because it doesn't care. It doesn't mark it. The Remain in Mexico policy, which also involves sending people back to Mexico, also led to an increase in recidivism prior to the Title 42 policy. The entire Trump mechanism artificially jacked up the numbers of people crossing because they tried and tried and tried and tried again. Because they didn't bother to process them. They're not following through. Okay. Does everybody gather that? Does anybody understand how moronic using Title 42, what's effectively a tourniquet to solve a head wound, is at this point? And that the reason Republicans want this to continue, the reason Republicans want Title 42 to continue is because it artificially raises the number of crossings. It creates the illusion of an invasion at the border. It creates the illusion of 5 crossers for every single crosser. You get me? All right. Yeah. Direct pressure on a head wound, right. This is this is as clear as I can fucking be about this. And it is everywhere. Every study that you look at, what's going on at the border, look at this one right here. We've looked at a similar graph before. Blow this fucker up so you can look at it. 40% of the people who cross have no prior crossings listed. And that largely is because they are either children or technically minors under the age of 18, or alleging themselves to be minors, and therefore there's no mark. So I would cut off another third of that, of this 40%, for folks that have been over multiple times, but since they're children, they don't check a box next to them because they don't care because it's a child. A quarter of the people that you see have crossed more than 3 times. 3 plus. 13% have when they are arrested, have already been arrested 2 times. 1% have already crossed once. And again, this doesn't account for, it's interesting that it creates sort of like this 100% idea, but that 24% of arrests accounts for somewhere in the order of 60% of crossings. Just that one chunk. I know. I understood there would be no math. Well, I think it's important that we deal with this, and I point this shit out to you before we jump into today's clips. Because now that you are armed with that detail, now that you know that the story being told by assholes like that, and say her, Laura Ingraham, for example, this story that they're telling about Biden's border and the border, Biden border panic, Biden border. The entire story is built on a erupting volcano full of bullshit. That the end of Title 42 and the reuse of Title 8 and the regular processing of people who come to the border is going to lower the number of crossings exponentially, because you will be dealing with the single person and not these multiple crossings. Because if people try too many times and they're told this and they get rejected, they can't try again for 5 years, or they will be arrested, and they or their family will never have a chance to go in. And then they'll, we'll give you one shot. And if you try it again, you can never get in, and neither can your family, and and you get pressure from your society and your family to not do that again. Now, and there will always be groups that will always try for work and that kind of stuff. But when you're talking about families, you're talking about people who are just economic migrants or just trying to, move to the United States illegally, not asylum seekers, not day laborers or people who are just trying to work under the table, but people who want to come and live here or whatever, which is the vast majority of the crossers over the years, want to be in America and be Americans in that regard, as opposed to like nobody wants to live as like a third tier citizen all the time. Like when you bring your family here, your goal is to stay. If you're told that if you try that again illegally without following the rules, you'll never be able to come in, nor will your family members. That's what happens under Title 8, and the numbers go back down to relatively normal. Okay, but if you make up, this bullshit, Fox News host Laura Ingraham shares what the end of Title 42 means to the country and why the Biden administration is allowing open borders on the Ingraham angle. Same thing with here. The mess on our southern border is only getting worse, especially now Title 42 is scheduled to end this week, and Glenn is fired up about it. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we'll jump straight in because I think we can count on the dumbest and funniest take on this, and because, we love the comedies around here. But let's be abundantly clear that, and Glenn is kind of the perfect example of the crossroads of dumb shit and liar. That he is at the perfect intersection of too stupid to understand reality and too full of shit to care.